If you ask a Warhammer player what the worst thing about 10th edition is, eventually someone's going to point to an MDF rectangle. But honestly, I don't think people are just complaining about the terrain. I think they're complaining more about the direction of the hobby itself. Terrain has just sort of become the easiest symbol for that argument. I see terrain get a lot of hate, and while some of it's justified, I don't like how often that criticism ends up being aimed at tournament organisers, when many of these changes ultimately come from the way Games Workshop has designed the game. In 10th edition Warhammer, the only terrain really used outside of niche cases are the infamous L-shaped ruins. I think when people look back on 10th edition Warhammer in the future, there's going to be two things people remember. First is the rules being very simplified and watered down, and the second are these ruins. The downside of L-shaped ruins is that it's just a thin wall. It doesn't look amazing when compared to flavorful, beautiful boards with themed terrain, but you're taking a hit on aesthetic for functionality. As much as these boards are beautiful to look at, playing on them can actually be really brutal, sometimes turning an entire army strategy just completely off and making unwinnable games. Let's say, for example, there's an amazing board, but there's no footprints, so hiding behind terrain is really small, excruciating, and you just can't stage melee units properly. At that point, you're just going into an unwinnable game, which kind of defeats the purpose of spending all that time to create, optimize, and practice a list in the first place. A counterpoint to this argument I see is that Warhammer shouldn't be a competitive game. In fact, the esportsification of the game is in fact killing the hobby, with the famous line, "just play chess." I actually see where a lot of people who say this are coming from. I don't think it's justified, but having a hobby that you've spent thousands of hours and dollars into creating and playing a certain way, being challenged by a new design philosophy, isn't a fun thing to experience. In a funny way, I think it's a reverse situation of how I used to really enjoy Magic the Gathering back in 2015. The premier way to play was the 1v1 competitive standard format. Everyone played this. Then in 2013, a new way to play came to prominence, created by judges at competitive events. That was a 4-player game called Elder Dragon Highlander, or EDH for short. EDH is a great format. It was eventually renamed to Commander, and it very quickly caught on to the point where from like 2016 onwards, it overtook Standard and became the primary way people engage with the hobby. So the competitive 1v1 game that I fell in love with, optimizing builds and fighting every week for a better placing amongst amazing players, very quickly died and was replaced with a casual format with no real competition outside of brownie points. I look at Warhammer as the inverse of this, where there was a large OG player base who just enjoyed the narrative and role-playing aspects of the game, who have been thrown into these hyper-competitive editions where the design team are very clearly focused on frequent balance patches, like in a video game, making the rules a lot less wacky and more streamlined, so the game becomes more focused on balance and rather than having fun, powerful effects. I think hobbies like this, where you've invested so much time and money into, also is a massive pain point for these players, because unlike a video game where all you are doing is investing your time, then you get disillusioned with the game and abandoned it, you have a collection of personalized storied models constantly reminding you of the glory days, which some people may have even put their identities itself into. I do, however, hate the just play chess argument, because anything can be boiled down if you try hard enough. And while chess is obviously the balanced 1v1 game, I think it's just a pretty toxic response that doesn't actually contribute to the conversation. And it's the same as if someone just replied to them with "go play D&D." While I believe players' concerns are justified, I do think that another consideration to be made about the terrain being ugly is actually supplying the terrain for an event. Tournament organisers need sometimes 100 sets of terrain for an event, which they need to set up, store, and transport. This can be like a box per table, so you need a terrain set that's stackable to store and cheap enough to mass produce. That's where these MDF ruins become an amazing tool for these organisers. And honestly, sometimes I see comments about people complaining about how the terrain looks, and I think it's more of a dig at the TOs than the actual GW terrain rules. Terrain rules for 10th edition are boring as hell, like we all know it. We went from dense cover giving melee bonus saves, forests giving shooting saves, craters giving movement penalties, to just having obscuring. 11 seems like rather than solve the flavour of terrain, they're making an effort just to scrap the L-shaped ruin, as a way to appease all the hate from the community that they get. Hidden is a cool mechanic though, and especially with the go-to ground for heavy terrain pieces adding up for at least some variety. But with competitive tournaments most likely always using the cheapest available to run large-scale events, I feel like these complaints will always be around. Ultimately, the worst part about it is that technically, in 10th edition there are other terrain rules available, they just aren't used in competitive formats. So if you wanted to make your own beautiful board, you're more than welcome to do so in your own personal games. In fact, you can even go back and play an older edition of Warhammer. It isn't like a live service game where you can't roll it back to its original state. I know it's easier said than done, but you really can find like-minded people interested in playing older editions with you through the community. Like, I can go back and play RTR, Theros, and Khan's Block from Standard in 2015 whenever I want, or just plug in a SNES game. But the community passion won't be there, and I understand that that can be a lot of the enjoyment. I think we can all agree terrain seems to be one of the parts of the game GW struggle with the most at the moment, and criticism is important for giving feedback to improve the game. So this isn't a video about me telling people to stop complaining, far from it. I just think we gotta channel it to more constructive areas. Thanks for watching, I really hope you enjoyed, and thank you for everybody who subscribed. We've hit 1,000 subscribers on the channel. That means I am officially a real YouTuber, almost. I hope to get better and continue making content that people enjoy. And I work full time, so this is more of a hobby for me, but I hope I can really keep improving and start making content that people enjoy watching to making stuff that people love watching. If you have any ideas for a video that you want to see, please let me know. I always listen to feedback. I made my painting video because someone asked me about the painting process, so I really do check the comments. Thanks for watching, and I hope I see you in the next one.